The gun was already down when she spoke. That is the part people get wrong when they tell it now. They picture the worst, because the worst is what the morning had been pointed toward. But by the time Lottie Roundtree said the words that would follow Glenn Tolliver for the rest of his life, the pistol had dropped to his side, and his hand was not steady, and hers was folded calm in her lap, like a woman waiting for a bus.
"You think that scares me?"
she said. It was not a question. She was 58 years old, and she had buried a husband, and she had read 10,000 pages of other people's cruelty across a career, and a frightened man with a badge and a sidearm in a quiet subdivision was to her a problem of paperwork that had not yet been filed. Tolliver laughed. It came out wrong too high, the laugh of a man who has just understood that the room is no longer his. "Lady," he said, "you have no idea the kind of trouble you are in." She did. She knew it better than he did. She had signed the order 14 months ago, but you do not know any of that yet. Let me take you back to the start of the morning, because the start is where the weight of this lives, and if I drop you at the end, you will not feel what she felt. Sitting in a 15-year-old sedan with a broken taillight, watching a man decide she was no one. Her name was Adeline Roundtree, and everyone who loved her called her Lottie, and there were fewer of them every year. Her husband, Caleb, had been gone 3 winters. He had been a high school band director, a man who could hear a wrong note from the back of a gymnasium and never once made the child who played it feel small about it, and she had loved him for that more than for anything. Their daughter, Simone, lived 2 states north and called on Sundays and worried the way children worry about a widowed parent in long pauses and careful questions. It was Simone who had pinned the voice recorder to the home screen of her mother's phone the last time she visited, not for any reason but a daughter's nagging. "Just press it if anything ever feels off, Mama. Promise me." Lottie had promised the way you promise a child to make them stop, and had not thought of it since. She drove the old sedan because she liked it. That is a thing people did not understand about Lottie. She could have driven anything. The car she chose smelled of the cedar block she kept in the door pocket and of the coffee she brought in a dented steel thermos, and the seat had molded itself to her over the years until it held her like a hand. She had a newer car in the garage at home, and it sat there, resentful and unused. She was on her way to a hardware store on the far side of the county that morning, because the gate latch on her back fence had rusted through, and she had decided, the way you decide small things to keep the large ones at bay, that she would fix it herself before the figs came in. She took the road through the subdivision because it was prettier than the highway. That was the only reason. Crepe myrtles down both sides, just past their bloom, the spent petals stuck to the wet asphalt in pink commas. Sprinklers going on a few lawns, even though it had rained in the night. The smell of cut grass and wet stone coming through the window she had cracked 2 inches. A man in a robe at the end of a driveway, bending for his newspaper, not looking up. She had driven this road maybe 4 times in her life. She would never be able to drive it again without her hands going cold on the wheel. But she did not know that yet either. The cruiser was parked at an angle in the mouth of a cul-de-sac, the way a car parks when it is waiting rather than resting. She noticed it the way she noticed everything, automatically, a habit 30 years deep. And she noted the angle and the idle, and filed it, and drove on. In her mirror, the cruiser pulled out behind her. No lights. She slowed. The lights came on then, and she put on her blinker and eased to the curb under a myrtle, and she shut off the engine, and put both hands on the top of the wheel where they could be seen. And she waited. "This is the thing I need you to hold on to." She put her hands on the wheel before she was asked. She had taught that gesture to other people in other rooms for other reasons. She knew exactly how a morning like this was supposed to go because she had spent a career studying the mornings where it had gone wrong. The officer who came to her window was named Glenn Tolliver, and he had worked this road and the 3 subdivisions around it for 9 years. And in those 9 years, he had learned that it was a place where money lived, and trouble could be invented, and that a certain kind of stop made on a certain kind of person on a quiet morning almost never came back to bite him. He was 55. His knees hurt. He had a daughter in college whose tuition he resented paying, and a second mortgage he did not tell his wife the full size of. And somewhere, in the last few years, the part of him that had become a police officer to help people had been quietly sold off piece by piece for reasons that had all seemed reasonable at the time. I tell you this not to make you pity him. I tell you because a man who believes he is owed is far more dangerous than a man who is simply cruel. And you should understand which one was walking up to her window. He did not look at her face first. He looked at the car, then the taillight, then her clothes, the gray hooded sweatshirt, the absence of jewelry, the dented thermos in the cup holder. He did the arithmetic that he had done 1,000 times, and the arithmetic told him this was nobody. That was his first mistake, and it was not the last, but it was the one all the others grew from. "License and registration," he said. Not "good morning," not the reason for the stop. He rested his hand on the sill of her window and leaned, putting his weight into her space. A small dominance, a thing he did without thinking anymore. "Good morning, officer," she said. "May I ask what you stopped me for?" "License and registration. I'm happy to give you both. I'm reaching to my right for the registration in the glove box, and my license is in the bag on the seat. I'm telling you so you know where my hands are going." She said it evenly, the words of a person who has had this conversation in her mind 100 times, so that her body would know what to do when her mind was afraid. "You got a mouth on you," Tolliver said. "I have a question," she said. "It isn't the same thing." He told her later it was the calm that did it. In the version of the morning he told himself afterward, before everything came apart, he would say that she had been combative, that she had refused to comply, that she had reached for something. None of that was true, and all of it would be on tape. What was true was simpler and worse. Her calm offended him. A woman who looked like nothing in a car worth nothing was not afraid of him, and his whole sense of himself on this road for 9 years had been built on the fear of people who had decided it was cheaper to be afraid than to be right. She had not made that calculation. He could see she had not, and it enraged him in a way he could not have named. And that is when his hand moved to the grip of his sidearm, not drawing it, just resting there, a threat with the safety of deniability on it. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. She did not move yet. "I'd like to know the reason for the stop before I step out. That's my right, and you know it's my right." And then, because she could not help the habit of a lifetime, "And I'd ask you to take your hand off your weapon. There's no call for it. I'm a woman of 58, sitting still in a parked car." That should have been the end of it. With anyone else it would have been. But Tolliver had crossed some line inside himself somewhere back down the road before she had even appeared. And now the morning was sliding, and he drew the pistol. He did not point it at her head the way the worst version of this would have it. He held it low and across his body, the muzzle toward the door. The gesture of a man showing a thing rather than using it. And that distinction is the only mercy in this whole account. And it is a thin one. And Lottie Roundtree, who had once cross-examined a man who had done far worse than Glenn Tolliver, and had made him weep on the stand without ever raising her voice, looked at the gun, and then up at his face, and she felt the cold come into her hands, and she let it, and she said the words. "You think that scares me?" Here is what she was thinking in that moment, because she told Simone later, and Simone told it at the ceremony where they gave the recording a kind of honor it did not want. She was not thinking she was safe. She knew she was not safe. She was thinking about every person who had ever sat where she was sitting with no title in their pocket and no investigation with their signature on it, no card to play. Nothing between them and a frightened man with a gun, but the thin grace of being believed, and how rarely that grace had come. She was thinking that whatever happened to her in the next 60 seconds, it would at least finally be recorded, because her right hand had drifted to the seat, and her thumb had found the phone and pressed the place her daughter had pinned, and the red dot was live. That was her one move. She would not make another for a long time. She had decided, in the space of a breath, the thing that would define everything after. She would not say the words that would save her. She would not reach into her bag for the credentials that would end this in an instant, the laminated card and the badge that would make Glenn Tolliver's blood run out of his face. Because if she ended it that way, it ended only for her. The road went on. The next car, the next morning, with the next person who had no card, went on. And the thing she had spent 14 months building quietly in rooms he would never see would be a thing she had used to buy her own way out of one bad morning, instead of the thing it was meant to be. So she put her hands back on the wheel, and she let him think she was no one, and she let it run. "Out," he said again, and this time she opened the door slowly and stood, and he stepped back, but kept the gun low and across him, and his eyes went past her to the radio on his shoulder. "Let me tell you what was happening that he did not know, because you should carry it the way she carried it." 14 months earlier, a field office of the bureau Lottie helped run had opened a quiet file on a municipal police department 3 counties over from her own home. It had started small, the way these things do, with a forfeiture number that did not add up. A patrol division was seizing cash and cars from motorists at a rate that did not match its arrest figures, and the money was moving through channels that bent in ways money does not bend on its own. The file had grown. A pattern of stops had emerged, then a pattern of complaints about those stops, and then the strangest thing of all, which was that the complaints had no afterlife. People filed them, and they vanished. Somewhere in that department was a drawer, literal or otherwise, where citizen complaints went to be stamped with a single word and forgotten. The word, when investigators finally saw the stamp, was unfounded. Lottie had read the file. As deputy director, she read many files, but this one she had read 3 times, because it had a quality she recognized from her years as a prosecutor. The quality of a thing that was not one bad man, but a system that protected one bad man, and others like him. And those were the cases she had given her life to. She had signed the authorization to expand the investigation. Her signature was on the order in the small, precise hand Caleb used to tease her about the hand of a woman who had learned penmanship in a school that no longer existed. The lead agent on the file was a man named Reginald Halsey, careful and slow and relentless. And he had spent the 14 months drawing the threads tight, and he did not yet have the one thing every case like this needs and almost never gets. He did not have a clean witness. He had numbers, and he had vanished complaints, but he did not have a person of unimpeachable standing who had sat in the seat, felt the stop, watched the machine work from the inside, and lived to describe it under oath. He was about to get one. He just did not know it would be her. And she did not know he was 40 minutes away, because the subdivision Tolliver worked was at the edge of the same department's jurisdiction, and the road Lottie had taken, because it was pretty, ran straight through the heart of the thing she had been hunting from a desk. She had not engineered it. The world is not that tidy. She had simply needed a fence latch and chosen the prettier road, and the case she had built had reached up out of the file and taken hold of her own wrist. "Where are you headed?" Tolliver said. He had holstered the gun now, which was its own small admission, and he had her standing at the rear of her car with her hands at her sides. "A hardware store," she said. "On Route 9. I need a gate latch." "That right." He said it the way you say a thing you have already decided is a lie. "You don't live around here." "No, I'm passing through." "Passing through." He walked a slow circle around the car, looking in the windows, his hand trailing the trunk lid. "A lot of break-ins in this neighborhood lately. A lot of people passing through, casing houses. You understand how that looks." "I understand exactly how it looks," she said. It looks like a woman driving to a hardware store. That was confrontation 1, and she lost it the way the outline of every bad morning has the harmed person losing the early rounds. He had the power and the badge and the authority to keep her standing on the side of a road, and she had a recording running in a car he had not yet thought to search, and a decision she had made not to use the only thing that would help her. The balance was all his. But the recording was the cold move underneath the hot one, the thing he could not see, and you knew it was there even as he won. And that is the kind of tension she lived inside for the next hour, and the kind I am asking you to live inside now. A woman across the street had come out onto her porch with a mug, and she watched for a moment, and then she went back inside, and the door shut. That was the first of them. There would be others. You should start counting the doors that close, because the closing of doors is its own quiet account of a place. And at the end, I will tell you what each one cost and what it bought. Tolliver came back around to her. "Tell you what," he said. "I'm going to need you to let me look in the vehicle." "You don't have cause," she said, "and I don't consent to a search. I'll stand right here. I won't interfere, but I don't consent." He smiled then, and it was not a nice smile, and it was the smile of a man who had just been handed the excuse he wanted. "Refusing a search," he said into his shoulder radio loud enough for her to hear, narrating a story that was not happening for an audience that would later matter very much. "Subject is being uncooperative, requesting a unit." And then he reached past her into the open driver's door, and he took her bag off the seat, and he turned it over, and he poured it out onto the trunk of her car. I want to slow down here, because this is the moment the morning turned from an injustice into a cruelty. And the difference matters. An injustice you can argue with. A cruelty is meant to be felt. He did not search the bag. Searching would have meant looking for something. He emptied it. He upended a woman's pocketbook onto the metal in front of a street of houses so that the contents rolled and scattered, the wallet and the reading glasses and the little tin of mints and the folded grocery list in Caleb's handwriting that she had never been able to throw away. And a photograph. The photograph was of Caleb. It was the one she kept behind her license, a small print from a day at the shore the summer before he got sick. His face turned toward her and laughing at something she had said, and it slid out across the trunk lid and came to rest. And Tolliver looked at it, and he flipped it over with one finger so it lay face down on the dirty metal. The way you turn a card, you have decided not to play. He did it without thinking. That was almost the worst part. It cost him nothing. He turned her dead husband's face to the grime because it was in his way, and he went on talking into his radio, and Lottie Roundtree stood very still and looked at the back of that small white rectangle and did the hardest thing she did all morning, which was nothing. She did not pick it up. She did not let her face move. She breathed the way Caleb used to breathe before he raised his baton, the slow breath that gathered a room. And she let the recording run, and she thought with a clarity that frightened her, "That is on tape now. You have done that on tape, and you will answer for that small thing along with all the large ones." She did not pray for justice. She was not a woman who prayed for outcomes. She prayed, if it was praying, only that the little red dot was still lit, that the microphone had been close enough that whatever else happened, she would not be a woman with only a story. That was confrontation 3, and she lost it too. Lost it worse, because now it was not her standing that he had taken, but something of Caleb's. And the watching street had not made a sound. A second cruiser arrived. The sergeant who got out of it was named Hollis Macklin, and he was the shift supervisor. And he was the kind of man who had spent 20 years learning exactly how much to see and no more. He took in the scene, the scattered bag, the woman, the officer, and he understood all of it instantly, and chose to understand none of it. "What have we got, Glenn?" "Uncooperative subject. refused a search. I think she's casing houses. Want to get the car towed and bring her in, sorted out at the station? Now there was no reason on this earth to tow that car. It was legally parked at a curb. But Macklin walked to it and looked at the broken taillight and said, "Equipment violation. Yeah, call it in." And he got on his own radio and called for a tow. And that was the system reaching its second hand into the morning. The supervisor not stopping the cruelty, but smoothing it, giving it paperwork, making it procedure. That was Confrontation 4, the cold one. The one where you watch the machine do the thing machines do, which is to take a single man's bad act and wrap it in the language of routine, until it cannot be told apart from a Tuesday. And there was a third officer, now hanging back by the second cruiser. A young woman in a uniform so new it still had the fold lines from the box. Her name was Lacey Hardy, and she was 19 days out of the academy, riding with Macklin to learn the road. And she was watching the photograph lie face down on the trunk. And she was learning something the academy had not taught her. I will come back to her. Hold her in your mind. She has not done anything yet. That is the point of her. Not everyone who matters acts at once. "Ma'am," Macklin said, almost kindly, the kindness of a man closing a lid. "We're going to take you down to the station and get this straightened out. Easier for everybody if you don't make a thing of it." And here Lottie made her one aloud call. They let her because they had not searched her and did not know who she could reach, and because a refused phone call is the kind of thing that looks bad later, and Macklin was always thinking about later. She took her phone from where it sat in the car, the red dot still live, and she did not call Halsey, whose number she knew, because to call Halsey was to end it the easy way, and to make the whole morning about her rescue instead of the thing underneath. She called a number she kept for emergencies that were not this kind, an old colleague, a man who could have made calls, and it rang, and it rang, and it went to voicemail. She stood holding the phone with the dead line against her ear, and for the first time that morning, something in her chest gave way a little. She had been so certain in the cold, competent center of herself that there was a thread she could pull, and the thread had not been there. The man had not answered. It was 9:40 on an ordinary morning, and the one call she had allowed herself had gone nowhere. And Macklin was taking her elbow now, not roughly, just steering. And the tow truck's diesel was grinding up the street, and she understood with a falling feeling that she was going to be put in the back of a police car, and that the only difference between her and every person she had built her life trying to protect was a recording on a phone she was about to lose, and a signature on an order 3 counties away that no one here would ever connect to the woman in the gray sweatshirt. This was the failure. Not the near miss, not the almost. The real one. The plan, such as it was, had collapsed. She had made her one move and her one call, and both had come to nothing. And she sat down in the back of Macklin's cruiser when he opened the door because there was nothing else to do. And she folded her hands, and she prayed the only prayer she had, which was not for herself. Let it have caught his voice. Let there be a record. Let me not be a woman with only a story. The door shut. Through the window she watched Tolliver sweep the contents of her bag off the trunk and into the gutter with the side of his hand, the photograph going last. And she closed her eyes. Now, Lacey Hardy, 19 days out of the academy. While Macklin dealt with the tow, and Tolliver wrote his fiction on a clipboard, Hardy had drifted the way a person drifts when their feet are moving them somewhere their courage has not yet agreed to go, toward the open door of Macklin's cruiser, where a laptop showed the morning's call log and the department's recent activity. She was supposed to be learning the system. She was learning it. She saw the tow order go in, and she saw it auto-populate against the woman's plate. And she saw, because she was new enough to still read everything, the little flag the system threw when a plate had prior contacts. And she clicked it the way you click a thing you are not sure you are allowed to click. There were 3 prior stops on the woman's vehicle in this jurisdiction, all 3 in the last 6 months, all 3 by Tolliver. And against all 3, in the disposition field, the same word stamped and closed. Unfounded. Lacey Hardy was 19 days into a career, and she had a younger brother she was helping support, and a probationary status that meant any officer above her could end her with a sentence. And she stood at that laptop and felt the floor of the thing she had joined drop away beneath her. 3 stops, 1 officer. The same word 3 times, and a woman in the back of a car who had done nothing but drive to a hardware store and refuse to be afraid. She did not have a plan. People who do the right thing in moments like this almost never have a plan. What she had was a phone in her own pocket and 20 seconds of nerve, and she used the first to photograph the screen, and she used the second to walk to Macklin and say, in a voice that came out smaller than she wanted, "Sarge, there's 3 priors on her plate, all unfounded, all Tolliver. That's a pattern, Sarge. We should at least—" "You should learn your job," Macklin said, not even looking at her, "before you start reading other people's." And there it was, the thing she had been afraid of, the door her whole new career was supposed to keep her on the safe side of, swinging open. She could go back to the second cruiser and be quiet and have a pension someday, or she could open her mouth one more time. She stood there with the photograph of the screen in her pocket and did the arithmetic that the street had done, that the woman on the porch had done, that everyone in this story except Lottie Roundtree had done. The arithmetic of how much it costs to see. She was still doing the arithmetic when the man with the camera changed it. His name was Jermaine Eubanks, and he was 22, and he did the lawns on this street, 3 of them, every Tuesday and Friday. And he had been standing beside his trailer at the curb 50 yards down since before the bag went onto the trunk, and his phone had been up and recording for 51 minutes. He had not posted it. He had not called out. He had a habit learned young and learned hard of keeping his eyes down and his hands visible around police, and every instinct in him said, "Put the phone away. Go cut the next lawn. This is not your trouble." But he had watched a man pour out an old woman's purse and flip a photograph face down, and something in him that was older than the fear had kept the camera up, and now he walked against everything toward the cruisers, holding the phone out in front of him like a thing that might protect him. "I got it," he said. "I got all of it. 50 minutes. You poured her bag out. I got it on here." His voice shook, but the phone did not. "I'm not deleting it. You can take me in too, but I'm not deleting it." Tolliver came toward him fast, and Macklin came faster. But the calculus had already changed, because there is a thing that happens when one person stops doing the arithmetic and just says the true thing out loud, which is that the arithmetic stops working for everyone else too. Lacey Hardy heard the young man say, "I'm not deleting it." And she heard her own voice, before she had decided to use it, say, "And there's 3 priors all marked unfounded, all by Officer Tolliver. And I have a photograph of the screen, and I'm a witness to all of this, and I'm not deleting mine either." It cost her. I want to be clear that it cost her, because the engine of a morning like this only matters if you understand the price. She was certain standing there that she had just ended the only career she had ever wanted, 19 days in. Macklin turned on her with a look that promised exactly that. She had no card. She did not know what Lottie knew. She acted blind on nothing but the word stamped 3 times and a photograph face down in a gutter. And that is the purest kind of courage there is. The kind with no safety under it. The truth had started to speak. It was speaking out of a frightened lawn care worker and a 19-day rookie. Two people with the least power on that street, and it was thin and shaking. And it was not enough, not yet, to free the woman in the back of the car. But it was on the air now, and it could not be put back in the drawer. And that is when the federal car pulled in. It was not dramatic. That is the thing about the real ones. It was a gray sedan, unremarkable, the kind of car the Bureau buys by the hundred. And it came up the street at the speed of a car that has been driving a while and is nearly somewhere. And it stopped at an angle that blocked the tow truck, and a man got out who was not young and not in a hurry. Reginald Halsey had been on his way to interview a former clerk 3 streets over, a woman who had once worked the records desk of the very department these cruisers belonged to, and who had, after 14 months of silence, agreed to talk. He had heard the tow call on the scanner he kept low in his car, out of an old habit, the address inside the geography of his own investigation, and he had turned toward it the way a man turns toward a sound he has been listening for so long he no longer notices he is listening. He came up to Macklin with his credentials already open. He did not raise his voice. He has told people since that he did not at first understand what he was walking into, that he thought it was a routine stop adjacent to his case, and he meant only to observe. He showed the badge. He said the name of the bureau and the number of the field office. And he saw Macklin's face do the thing that faces do. And he saw Tolliver take a step back, and he turned to look at the woman in the back of the cruiser, because some instinct told him to. And through the glass, Lottie Roundtree opened her eyes and looked back at him. He knew her. Of course he knew her. He had spent 14 months staring at a file with her signature on the authorization, the small, precise hand. And he had sat in a conference room a year ago while she asked him 3 questions about his case that no one else in the room had thought to ask. And he had walked out of that room understanding for the first time how good she was. He stood on a suburban street with a tow truck idling and a young man holding up a phone and a rookie who had just thrown away her career. And he looked at the deputy director of his bureau sitting in the back of a municipal police car with her dead husband's photograph in the gutter. And Reginald Halsey, who was not a man given to large gestures, said one word quietly, the way you say a thing when the size of it has just landed on you. "Ma'am?" Then he opened the door. Here is where the morning turned all the way over, and I am going to give it to you the way it happened, one piece at a time, because that is the only way to feel the weight of it, and because she had earned, after an hour of giving nothing away, the right to have it told slowly. The first thing was not the credentials. She still did not reach for them. The first thing was that she got out of the car slowly, an old habit of dignity, and she walked to the trunk, and she crouched down at the gutter, and she picked up the photograph of Caleb, and she turned it face up, and she wiped the grit off it with her thumb, and she put it in the breast pocket of her sweatshirt over her heart. She did that first, before anything else, before a single word about who she was, and the street watched her do it. That was the human moment, the one the whole hour had been pointed at without anyone knowing. A woman picking her husband's face up out of the dirt and cleaning it and putting it where it belonged. She would tell Simone later that it was the only part of the morning she would not have traded for anything. The picking up. Then she stood and she looked at Glenn Tolliver, who had stopped moving entirely, and she said, "You asked where I was headed. I told you the truth. A hardware store for a gate latch." She let that sit. "Everything I told you this morning was true. You'll want to remember that, because everything you said is on 2 recordings now, and none of it was." Halsey said carefully, "Ma'am, do you want to—" "Not yet," she said, to him gently. Then to Macklin, "Sergeant, your officer drew a weapon on a stationary motorist who had her hands on the wheel, conducted a stop. He has not articulated a reason for, emptied my personal property onto the road, ordered an unlawful tow of a legally parked vehicle, and your response was to call for the tow yourself. Your rookie tried to tell you there was a pattern. You told her to learn her job. She turned her head. Officer Hardy, what was the word on all 3 prior stops? Lacey Hardy, who had been certain 10 minutes ago that she had ended herself, stood up straight. Unfounded, ma'am. All 3. All by Officer Tolliver. Unfounded, Lottie said. She said it the way she had once said words to juries, turning them so the light caught the rot in them. That is a word a department uses when it has decided not to look. There is a great deal of it in your department, Sergeant. I know because I have spent 14 months reading about it. And now finally, only now that it was not about saving herself, she reached into the inner pocket of the bag Halsey had handed her past the scattered things, and she took out the slim leather case, and she let it fall open. She did not announce the title. She let him read it. She watched Glenn Tolliver's eyes move across the words, Deputy Director, and the seal, and the name, Ottoline Roundtree. And she watched the arithmetic he had done at her window an hour ago run backward all at once and come apart. And she watched the blood go out of his face the way water goes out of a tipped glass all at once, and with nowhere to go. You think that scares me? She said again, softly, giving him his own laugh back without any of the laughter in it. You said I had no idea the kind of trouble I was in. I'd like you to sit with how wrong you had that. Take your time. Halsey had his phone out now and was talking low and fast, and within the half hour the gray sedan would be joined by others, and the morning would stop being one woman's bad hour and become the hinge of a 14-month case. But that came later. What happened on the street in real time was that Reginald Halsey looked at the young man, still holding up his phone, and said, Son, I'm going to need that footage, and I'm going to make sure it's the most important thing you ever recorded, and nobody is taking you anywhere. And he looked at Lacey Hardy and said, Officer, write down everything you saw while it's fresh. Everything. You did the right thing. Remember that you did it before anyone could reward you for it, because that's the part that counts. And he looked at Macklin and at Tolliver and said nothing at all, which was worse than anything he could have said. Let me tell you now the way the dominoes went down, because she would want you to know that the morning did not end with her vindication. Her vindication was the smallest part of it. Glenn Tolliver was relieved of duty before the tow truck left the street. His weapon and badge were taken from him on the curb where he had emptied her bag, and a man does not come back from being disarmed in front of the houses he has policed for 9 years. Within the month, he was terminated for cause, the conduct named in the record so plainly that no other department would ever take him. His name, now a thing that turned up in a background check, forever attached to exactly what he had done. But he was not charged for one stop. That is the part that mattered, the part she had refused her own rescue to protect. He was charged as one strand of a pattern because the recordings and the rookie's photograph and the young man's 51 minutes were laid down beside 14 months of federal work, beside the forfeiture numbers that did not add up, and the drawer of complaints stamped with the word that meant, we decided not to look. The clerk Halsey had been driving to meet talked, and then others talked, because the thing that keeps a system silent is the belief that no one will ever be believed. And that belief had just died on a suburban street in front of a man with a lawnmower. Sergeant Hollis Macklin, who had smoothed the cruelty into procedure, who had called the tow himself, was placed on leave within the week and chose to retire before the inquiry reached him, which the inquiry noted and did not honor. The drawer of complaints was subpoenaed. The word unfounded, it turned out, had been stamped on the grievances of dozens of people over several years. Each of them told, in effect, that they had only a story, and each of those stories was now reopened, and the people who had told them were called back and listened to, some of them for the first time in their lives. The department's chief did not survive the spring. A consent decree followed, with mechanics in it, real ones, a requirement that every complaint be logged by an independent office, that no officer dispose of a citizen's grievance against himself, that the drawer could never be a drawer again, and against the falling, the rising. Lacey Hardy, who had been 19 days from the safe side of a closed door, was not fired. She was, after the dust settled, and quietly, at Lottie's suggestion, made a field training officer within 2 years, which meant that the first thing every new officer in that department now learned about the road was learned from the one person who had refused to do the arithmetic. Jermaine Eubanks finished the welding certificate he had been paying for, one course at a time. The tuition for the rest of it was covered by a fund he was told was anonymous, and never learned was not. The clerk who talked was given the protection she had been afraid to ask for. Otis Garrick, a man who had given up driving to work after Tolliver stopped him 4 times in a single autumn until he lost the job he could no longer reliably reach, had his record corrected and received in a plain envelope an apology with a real signature on it, the first he had ever gotten from anyone in a uniform. Inez Mabry, whose nephew's complaint had been among the stamped and buried, came to the hearing and sat in the front and watched. And afterward she said only that she had not known all those years that the drawer was a real drawer, and that knowing was somehow both worse and better than not. Glenn Tolliver. Where is he now? He is a name in a file and an absence at a dinner table. His daughter finished college. His wife learned the full size of the second mortgage in the worst possible way. He is the kind of man this country produces and protects until the morning it suddenly does not. And the protection that had wrapped him for 9 years turned out in the end to be exactly the thing that buried him. Because a man alone can be forgiven, and the pattern cannot. As for Lottie Roundtree, she fixed the gate latch herself the following Saturday, with a part she finally bought from the hardware store on Route 9. Driving the highway this time, not the pretty road. And she will not drive the pretty road again. The figs came in heavy that year. She split them over the back fence with the widower who lived behind her, the way she and Caleb always had. And she set out 2 cups of coffee on Sunday mornings the way she always had. One of them for no one, the way the recently and the long-widowed both understand without explaining. She kept the photograph in the breast pocket of that gray sweatshirt, and she did not wash the sweatshirt for a long time. And when she finally did, she moved the photograph first to the dresser face up where the morning light from the window reached it. Simone asked her once on a Sunday why she had not just shown the man the badge at the start, why she had let it go on. Lottie was quiet for a while. Then she said that a badge would have saved one woman on one road on one morning, and she had not been able to see the use of that when there was a chance, if she only kept still long enough, of saving the road. She set the second cup down. The coffee steamed and went still. Outside, the figs hung dark and heavy on the branch, and the fence held, and the latch she had fixed with her own hands swung true. What would you have done sitting in that car with the one thing in your pocket that could end the whole nightmare, and the knowledge that using it would end it only for you? Most of us tell ourselves we would speak up, would show the card, would save ourselves, and there is no shame in that. But could you have stayed silent long enough to save the people who came after you? The ones you would never meet? That is a harder thing, and I do not know my own answer to it. Tell me yours in the comments. I read them, and the ones about this question always stay with me. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that staying quiet and staying still are not the same thing. One of them is surrender. The other, sometimes, is the bravest move on the board.